The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views and positions of the agency.
Welcome to DYCD Next Gen. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Cooks. Our monthly podcast features the very latest in everything DYCD has to offer, and we go right to the heart of the story, speaking to people and New Yorkers about the issues they face in their daily lives. Today, we are joined by Dr. Stephen Chambers, Executive Director of the NYC Young Men's Initiative, to celebrate Black History Month. Dr. Chambers, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great having you here. So let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
It's February, Black History Month. You know, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I want to ask you, what does that personally mean to you, and why do you think it's still important today?
I mean, Black history is, I believe, everybody's history, especially in the United States, and we're talking about, like, we celebrate that in this country.
Right.
So it is, to me, all diverse histories have value, and given, like, just the history of Black people in America and how we even got to America, and have built, in a lot of ways, the American infrastructure, a lot of the American economy is on the backs of Black folks. And to me, that is a history that should never be lost. Anytime we acknowledge or celebrate anything about this country, it should have a conversation about Black people, given how we've connected to or built this, the history. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it's important. It will always be. I was raised in a household where, like, Black history was celebrated even if we didn't do certain programs at school. I knew, like, the Black national anthem, all three verses before it was taught in the classroom. So it's just very true to who I am.
And you went to school here?
No, I'm from Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah, so okay. I was born and raised there.
I don't know much about Ohio, but does it have a big Black population, or is it?
Well, Columbus is the capital of Ohio, and it's probably 15% African American, and that's been a pretty steady and constant percentage since, for a while. Got you. Okay. Yeah.
Was there, like, a specific moment in your life when you fully understood the significance of Black history and its impact throughout your own journey to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a. So as I'm thinking about this question, I'm asking myself how much of my history, my identity, can be separated from Black history as a topic, as a just something very different from who I am, and it really can't be separated. So when I think about, like, moments of my life where Black history was valuable, I just think about all of the aspects of my upbringing where history in general were significant. And I always think back to conversations with my grandmother, my mom's mom, and my grandfather, my dad's dad. And in both respects, they were both storytellers. So anytime I'm sitting at their dinner table, or if it's my grandfather sitting on the porch with him, I'm hearing stories about how they got to parts of Ohio, their journeys from being children to adulthood, a lot of the struggles they faced to provide for their families. And a lot of my foundation is on the backs of them, their parents, their families. So anything that I do is always in acknowledgement of them. All of my ancestors, I feel and strongly believe that I carry my ancestry in everything that I do, in every way that I move. And I always try to be mindful of how I show up in the world, to be respectful to the peoples who allow me to even have some of the privileges that I have today.
And have you, like, ever looked into like your ancestry before? Have you ever learned interesting things, stuff you've never seen or heard of that maybe your grandparents might have known, or maybe?
Yeah, well, I know. So my grandparents moved to Ohio through the Great Migration. So they're all from my mom's side of the family is from Alabama. My dad's side of the family primarily from South Carolina. And during the Great during the Great Migration, they all moved up to Ohio, Michigan for better opportunities professionally and just for better treatment in general, socially. And so we did an ancestry maybe a decade ago. My sister is like Miss Historian, so she did all of, like we did like more than one of the programs. And I mean, you know, it's not too much of a surprise that we're from West Africa. Most of our lineage is West African, Ghanaian, Nigerian. But I do think there was a surprise because there was one, I can't remember which company we went through, but it was like some like Southern and Southeastern lineage. And that really surprised me because I'm like, how did that get in the mix? And so that's always just been kind of like curious to me. But even just thinking about my immediate ancestors, being from South Carolina and Alabama, a lot of that culture resonates in myself, my cousins, my parents to this day, all the way down to our cuisine, some of our language and slang, even just our ways of being, the way we just interact with each other. We're very communal. I was raised where my cousins were like my siblings. We all like were raised for the most part in the same church. We lived in close proximity in the city. It felt very Southern in a Midwestern context.
And when did you move to New York? Or was that like later in your life?
Oh yeah. So I moved here June 2020.
Oh wow, that's pretty recent.
Yeah, in the middle of the
that's
pandemic.
Pretty recent.
Yeah,
that's must have been a crazy time.
Yeah, I lived 3 or 4 other places before. Between Ohio and New York, I lived in Nashville for 3 years, Houston for 10 years, Hampton, Virginia for 4 years, Boston for 2 years, and then I moved here in 2020.
For like career and everything?
Yeah, so gotcha. I did my doctoral residency here in New York. And the way they do it, they match you to different agencies and cities. And so it was either going to be Oakland, California to work for an organization out there or New York City public schools. And I matched with public schools. So moved here June 2020.
Wow, and now you here.
Yeah, here I am.
And now you here.
Here I am.
That's great. So you went to an HBCU?
Yes, Hampton University.
I didn't butcher it.
I will name it. Hampton University.
Hampton University. Hampton University.
The real H. No, I'll say the better HU because and I'm being facetious, but I'm not. If you're in the circle of HBCUs, Hampton and Howard have a little bit of a rivalry. Howard, a little bit older, about a year older than us, they have a stronger, I believe, celebrity presence right, and history.
Right.
But I always say all HBCUs, I think, have a very they have their own value. When I'm in close company with my fellow HBCUers, though, I will be clear to say Hampton is the better of the two. Although I love Howard, I love my HBCUs in general. I love why HBCUs are here in this country. I think they have a lot of value to this day. But yeah, I went to Hampton.
And how did that experience going to Hampton? How did that experience shaping your identity, your confidence and your sense of purpose?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question because as I said earlier, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I was raised in the public school system. I was always in schools of racial diversity. And in a lot of ways, I was the minority, not only in my blackness, but in my black maleness. And in that, I always found myself othered. And I remember in high school just never really having good friends. I was always well known, and I guess you could use the word popular, but I never had friends. Anytime it was the weekend, people were hanging out, going to parties, doing a thing. I would be at the crib, at home, just chilling or working. I'm I'm gonna work. I'm gonna make some money.
Right.
And so I was I don't like this. I don't think this is how I should be. I don't think this is the whole world, essentially. And so I knew pretty early on in my high school career that I was going to an HBCU. I was raised watching shows like The Cosby Show, A Different World, and I was like, I'm going to Hillman College. Like, and if you know the history of that show, Hillman is based on Hampton University. It was filmed in the AUC down in Atlanta, but it was based on Hampton University.
Wow.
The region, they talk about spending the weekends on the beach. Hampton's 30 minutes from Virginia Beach. They talk about driving an hour north to Richmond, 2 hours to DC. That was our life. So I only applied to Hampton and Morehouse. And Hampton gave me the most money. So there I went. Because my
Easy
parents were
decision,
like, we're not, I mean, you could go, you know, where you want to go, but we're not paying. So I needed to find my way into a school that could pay me to come. I never told my parents that I only applied to HBCUs. They thought I was like applying to the Ohio States and some of the state schools that would have given me more money. But I was very serious about finding a community of Blackness where I could feel included or I could see myself. And so I shared earlier in this story, I felt other a lot growing up. But when I got to Hampton, I really found my tribe. I remember my freshman dorm. It was like a little honors dorm, the smallest dorm on campus, and all of maybe like 25 guys, we ended up being really close. I'm still best friends with 7 of those 25 to this day, like really close friends. We've been at each other's weddings, been to family funerals, like our families know each other. I would not have had that experience if I didn't go to a school like Hampton. Just the level of character building, the ways that I saw the diversity in Blackness. You hear often like Black is not a monolith. We are a diverse people. I've met friends from like New York and other parts of the country and even like internationally that just their Blackness looked different than mine in the way that they lived out that Blackness. And that to me was like so empowering. And it was just beautiful to just see so many different expressions of Blackness, all the way down to the music that people listen to, the fashion. I learned so much about myself and my culture by going to Hampton. And I would say like Hampton in a lot of ways prepared me to live in New York because I had a lot of friends who were from New York. And so I would hear stories. I would learn lingo and culture. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know a little bit about New York by way of them. And so I don't think I would have had those experiences if I stayed in like an Ohio State school or stayed closer to home.
Oh yeah, for sure. Could you like share like a memory from like your time at Hampton that like still influences how you lead and how you show professionally at your craft?
Yeah. So I had so I talked about funding. HBCUs are very like notorious for their financial aid offices. And notorious, I mean that in the truest sense of the word, like it's not good. So I had an outside scholarship. I had about 75% outside, 25% internal scholarship. That outside was hard because the financial aid office never seemed to have the check. They never like had it on time. I always had to go physically to the office, advocate for myself every single semester for 4 years. I remember my junior year, I didn't have housing coming off the summer. They're like, oh, we didn't get your check, so we bumped you out the dorm. And I'm like, what?
Crazy.
How you gonna leave me stranded?
That's crazy.
So I had to learn how to like not take no for an answer.
Right.
And I learned how to like be in people's face about stuff, especially when I felt like I earned it and deserved it. So Hampton really taught me to stand up for myself, to articulate myself. I remember instances when, you know, my grades were looking a little shaky in certain semesters, and I would write letters to my professors and in addition to office hours and really like plead my case. Like, look, I know I'm not where I should be. What can I do to get to where I should be? Or sometimes it's just taking the L. Like, if you earn the C, you get the C. But like keeping the relationship with my professors was more important than the grade. So I learned also in that moment that relationships are sometimes, and in a lot of ways, more important than the actual thing or the product or whatever it is you're doing. Like, are you still able to maintain relationships? And that really like proved to be valuable when I went on to apply for grad school. I had a roster of professors that I could reach out to and be like, hey, I need a letter of recommendation for law school. I need one for divinity school. I need one for whatever I was doing. I always had people in my corner who could just say, yeah, Steven's a hard worker. He is serious about excellence and his character is intact. And for me, HBCU culture kind of like creates this village atmosphere where your professors aren't just your professors. Even like the folks that are in the financial aid office, though you might be trying to like, you might cuss them out one day and they might do the same to you. At the end of the day, you might see them at the cafeteria and you're like, oh, hey, Miss Such and Such. And it's still like all love. Like they're just doing their job. You're just trying to do your job and get what you need. But at the end of the day, we're all in the struggle together and really just trying to build a stronger community together.
I want to go more into a role as an executive director for the Young Men's Initiative.
Yeah.
Could you explain a bit about what that is and what does a day look like for somebody that's like that's the head of that?
Yeah. So for those who aren't aware, the Young Men's Initiative is the city's initiative in service of closing disparity gaps for African American and Latino young men in particular, ages 14 to 24-5. Our goal is to think about all of the ways, all of like the whole ecosystem surrounding this demographic that we can push in on and improve. So education, workforce, health, all of the like social determinants of health, as you will, thinking of how to improve existing data or areas where Black and brown young men need support. And our job is to fund and partner with city agencies to create initiatives and programs that are in service of closing those gaps. And so this is month 2 for me in this role. And it's work that I've been doing my entire career in some form or fashion. I'm a classroom teacher by trade. I've worked in religious leadership for a number of years. And I've also worked in college access from the school district administration lens. And so this work for me is like a culmination of all of that. I get to be strategic about the areas that we invest. I also get to like put on my researcher hat and think about whatever the data is that's telling us stories. And if we don't have an accurate story, how do we get more of that story? I have an amazing team. Some of them are here with me today who are also passionate about this work. And so I think that is also very important to work with people who care. It's not just a paycheck to them. Right. They really care about this work and they really care about closing these gaps. And so when you have that level of alignment, it makes the day-to-day work easy. Of course, it's a heavy lift because we have about 20 programs across programs across the city, partnering with various agencies. That comes with a lot of nuance, strategy, thoughtfulness, relationship building. You have to create systems to track your progress and to also measure your success and even your failures so that you can iterate and do better in the next round. So a day-to-day for me changes every day, and I love that. If I was in a role that looked the same every day, I could probably not survive. I need it to stay fresh and new every day. Some days are filled with a lot of engagement meetings where I'm meeting with different agencies about the work that they're currently doing with YMI. Some days I'm meeting with external partners, so people who might want to join some of the work that we are either creating or haven't created yet. Some days are internal where I have a lot of engagement with my own team or with our agency, the Mayor's Office of Equity, across different offices. And then, some days there's a mix of like doing certain events out in the public or such as today, like doing the podcast with you, Ryan, and DYCD, which is also one of our partners. And then, there's the administrative lift where you are kind of like handling some of the back of house work that does take a lot of time and energy. And so I just try to be really thoughtful about my own capacity I'm big on workplace balance, work-life balance, and I try not to stay in the office too late. I try to vacation hard. I see Mark in the studio. He knows I love to take a vacation just as much as I like to work hard. So that keeping that balance, I think, makes me not only a healthier person but a healthier leader. I see leadership as something that is really like developing others and supporting others to be their best self.
And how long have you been a part of this initiative? How long have you been?
Well, this is month 2 for me.
Month 2.
In this particular role, but in some of my more immediate past roles, I had a lot of proximity to the Young Men's Initiative through some of the initiatives I was building in the deputy mayor's office.
Got you. Okay. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing young men of color in New York City right now, and how is the Young Men's Initiative addressing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think workforce will always be, I'll say 2 things. I think academic outcomes, I'll say workforce access, and probably mental and physical health are probably like the 3 big bucketed categories that I think our data is showing Black and brown young men could use the most support in. And if we can solve for those in those 3 buckets, we can shift and steer the outcomes in many other buckets and areas and lanes. And an example of that is if we're able to increase the literacy rates of young men, and we're able to employ more young men in roles and careers that are engaging to them, but that will also yield not only like finances for their immediate pockets, but generational wealth for their families, then the alternative of, they say, idle time is the devil's workshop. The alternative of being unengaged or disengaged or whatever the word is, when they're not engaged in something productive, can turn into something unproductive. And in some ways that looks criminal. In some ways that looks like people just not tapping into their full potential, which can also lead to mental health issues, family issues. So if we can solve for those big buckets, which we are doing in a lot of ways, then I think the outcomes, hopefully in like 10, 15 years, we won't need a YMI. Because the work that we're doing today is solving for those very like foundational core problems, and shifting mindsets too. We just celebrated 10 years for one of our flagship programs, NYC Men Teach, which recruits, trains, and credentials Black and brown men in the teaching profession. Because there's a lot of stats that show when you have Black and brown men as your teachers, students are more engaged, and that's all students, not just Black and brown students. And those teachers themselves are creating a pipeline, not only a pipeline, but a skill set that is almost foolproof. Like we will pretty much always need teachers and educators in some way. So you're kind of creating like this workforce stability that is really like reliable.
Do you have a story of like how you impacted a young man of color life for the better through this initiative? Any stories? Any positive,
I was thinking about that.
Positivity?
I because this is month 2 for me, I know we're making an impact on a larger scale and a more macro level in our programs. We just had an event in January around Martin Luther King Day, a mentorship event. We called it Dream Builders in partnership with NYC Service and New York City Public Schools, My Brother's Keeper. And a lot of, I made it a point to talk to a lot of the young men at that event just to kind of get their feedback. Like, okay, how's this event landed for you? Like, what part do you like the most? What do you not like? And most of the guys that I talked to said that they appreciated the smaller breakout groups where they could be in conversation with older, like with mentors. because in some ways, it was their chance to ask questions that they haven't been able to always ask. And I remember this young man came up to me and they were practicing their elevator pitches for like a proposal that they wanted to create. And so he didn't know that I was like one of the funders of the program, and he came and asked if he could pitch to me, and I was like, absolutely. And he was so nervous, but also so prepared. He had so many details to his proposal. He had clearly been trained very well because he gave me like a pointed ask. He stayed within the time frame. He asked me if there's anything that I could share to offer feedback to him. And I remember like just giving him some really pointed feedback, and he was able to take it. Like, sometimes everybody can't take feedback,
right?
Or when they hear it, like, oh,
sure.
So you didn't like what I said?
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to make what you said better. And he took it that way. But the thing that really stuck out to me was he emailed me maybe 2 weeks later, and asked a follow-up question to what I gave him. So in that exchange, I gave him my business card. I give my business card out a lot, and I didn't really expect him to follow up. I was just like, yeah, if you have questions, if you want to talk more about YMI, or if you want to give feedback to YMI, let me know. And he asked me a question about it. He asked if I could put him in touch with one of the speakers from that day who was a physician on a panel that we had earlier that morning. And so I was able to make a very direct connection for him because he asked, and because we had that very personal connection at the event. That shifted something for him, because now he can either, set up a day to shadow this person, or he might secure an internship, or he could just have a conversation with him where it opens his eyes and he can like take on a new perspective of what it means to be a physician. Because what I remember at that age is that you only hear like the titles of a lot of roles, and you never really know what the day-to-day of those roles looks like. Right. And so my advice to young people is always like, spend some time with the people you say you want to be. Even if that's a day or an hour. I remember doing that as a young person. Like everybody I asked, everybody I ran into that I was interested in, I wanted to be an architect at one point. I was like, hey, can I spend a day at the architectural firm? Hated it. And I'm like, oh, I want to be a lawyer. I'm like, okay, I could do this a little bit. Or I want to be, work at a Fortune 5 company in the marketing department. I did that for a whole summer. I loved it. But I realized at the end of the day, it wasn't fulfilling to me. So just spending time, exposure in certain career fields, I think is important. And so I was imparting that on this young man, and he really took it to heart, followed up, and hopefully, he made that connection.
Yeah, that's hopefully best of luck to him. Yeah, he took the steps to get where he wants to be. He
definitely did.
Yeah. Since we're currently in SYEP like application season, let's go and talk about like internships. What are the significance of internships, especially for students of color? And like, what have internships done for your career?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a good segue from what we were just talking about. I think so. I did a program called Inroads when I was in college. And that program was tailored specifically to African American and Latino students at the time. I'm not sure if that's still their mission, but that was what they did then. And they matched you with Fortune 500 companies across the country. I happened to do mine at the world headquarters at Nationwide Insurance in my hometown of Columbus for 2 of those summers. And then they had me at Kroger, which is a grocery store chain in Ohio, for one of those summers as like a store manager. And I was like, what's crazy? Like my store manager had a heart attack while I was like in that summer. And I was like, I will absolutely not be doing anything related to this work, because what do you mean? Like, how are you, this job did this to you? No, like, absolutely not.
That's insane. Yeah.
And then I Googled her salary and I was like, you had a heart attack for this? I mean, they still made decent amount at the time, but I was just like, no, that's not worth it. But I learned so much, because one thing I did learn from internships is there is no role or job or profession that is invaluable or like not worth at least exploring from my perspective. I remember some of my colleagues were like, why are you doing store manager? Like, what? How's that? Like, but I was like, you can learn so much from managing a grocery store. I remember my project was like, how do I increase the turnover of like biscuits or something random. It was like something in the bakery, like where I had to team with the bakery and like, well, how do we get people to buy more pies? And I'm just like, this could not be the best use of my time, but I learned so much about teaming, about sales and people patterns. You wouldn't think that you'd learn that. And so, but then the next summer I was at Nationwide and they had me like in the central office. I was in the diverse markets department. They were flying me to conferences and I was like, oh, I could do this. Like I could do the NAACP Image Awards, which is where they had us like staffing and engaging people there. But I will say, to answer your question, internships for me taught me more than the title or more than whatever it is I was doing. It wasn't just about like leaning into my marketing degree, which was my first degree. It wasn't just about like learning how to get more sales at the bakery of a Kroger. It was about how do you work with people? How do you learn what makes people tick? How do you learn how to work with diverse populations? And then how do you learn how to ask questions? Because in a lot of ways, I'm coming into these roles and I don't know anything. I don't know like what to wear. I don't know what the business norms are of like responding to an email. And so I asked a lot of questions and I was always met with supervisors who were willing to teach me because I was in the container of being an intern. And so when you have that title, people kind of like know that you're learning. And I think as I think about our young folks in New York and just across the country, internships are so valuable because they teach you more about yourself than I think any other experience could. You learn how to like adapt in new settings. You learn about different professions. You find exposure to parts of the work that you never knew existed. You might spend a day per se coming to YMI or our office, and maybe you thought you were coming to learn about YMI, but you learn that you really have an interest in NYC Her Future, which is the other component of this work for girls and young women. And so you can discover roles that aren't as popular when you're interning as well. I remember like growing up, it was always like doctor, lawyer, engineer. If you're not one of those, we don't want to hear from you. Like that was like the community I was kind of raised in. But then when you get in these internship spaces, you're like, oh, there's like contract managers, or like you could be, there's so many roles that we never hear of growing up. But once you get into the actual organizational space, you learn that there's so many lanes you can explore. And then that sets you up for success as you're investing in your education career. Like, do you want to pursue a degree? Do you want to get a certification? Do you want like a degree? You know, there are different paths young people can take, and internships help kind of open your eyes to what the world has to offer.
For young students or aspiring leaders listening to this podcast, what advice would you give them about honoring their history while building their future?
I would say, I think the way you frame that question is the advice I would give. Like, you should, in every way that you can, be respectful of your elders, those who aren't doing harm to you, of course, and then acknowledging the shoulders that you are sitting on. Like, a lot of young folks, and I don't want to generalize at all, but I know when I was growing up, we did not have a great understanding of how much privilege we had. Even in our Blackness, we still had a lot of privilege as we compare it to our parents and our grandparents. And so being like intentional about learning your history, like reading is important, and not just like hearing the sound bites from other people and what they've read. Doing your own research, I think, is important. Asking questions to elders. I don't appreciate people calling me Unc, but when they do, I will give them the knowledge that if they're engaging me at that level, I I'll step aside and offer whatever words of wisdom I can. And I think even that is acknowledging your history. And so I was raised in a community where Sankofa was like our mantra, which is like you reach as you climb. So as you are moving forward, what are you doing to give back, to look back, to help other people do the same? And that is like how I live my life. My little cousins, my nieces, and my younger siblings. I have a lot of mentees. And so I'm always thinking about, well, how can I make sure they're set up too while I'm also trying to get mine? And even when I say trying to get mine, it's always in service of the community anyway. So it's like all the credentials and awards and just like all of the ways that I show up in the world is always in service of pouring back into my community. And that to me is my best practice. That would also be my advice to people out there who want to be successful, a successful contributor to society and culture.
Anything else you'd like to say before I end the episode?
I would just say, since we talked about internships, make sure you apply for the SYEP. The application. When do applications close? Do you remember? March 13th. Yeah.
March 13th,
so make sure you get
March
those
13th.
in.
Make sure you apply.
Check out the Young Men's Initiative. If you haven't, our website is currently being updated. We got events and programs coming out every month.
Lots of good things on the way.
Yes, check out the socials.
All right. And yeah, that concludes today's discussion. For more information on DYCD, check out nyc.gov/DYCD, or be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Join us again next month for another episode of DYCD Next Gen. Once again, I'm your host, Ryan Cooks, and thank you guys for listening. And thank you, Dr. Chambers, for being on the show. Thank you so much.